definition of health is not just the absence of disease. It's literally the World Health Organization, which is corrupt as fuck. But ironically, their definition of health is not just the absence of disease. Ironically, when we talk about health, most people I talk to as well, and I tell them these things, they're like, oh, but I'm pretty healthy. I'm like, what makes you say you're healthy? 95% of what we're going to talk about is not stuff you're going to find online or in conventional education areas.
All right, guys, today's episode, I sit down with one of Australia's leading high-performance health coaches. He's a doctor of osteopathic medicine, and he studied human health for nearly a decade. We talked about so many things, like the number one thing that's actually stopping you from achieving optimal peak performance.
You're relying on stimulants, you're relying on caffeine, you got poor cognitive function, so you're not able to pay attention, poor memory. It can also be physical. You're always sore. Your recovery is quite poor. You're getting recurrent injuries. If we unravel the layers, you start to see it all comes from the same place, and it's like stress is the top of the pyramid.
We dived into the real stresses in everyday life and how it's actually causing more damage to your body and your future health than you even can imagine.
There's a multitude of things that can cause stress, and there's a lot of hidden stresses that people don't generally consider in their lifestyle, and these can be things like chemical stress. So, it could be from products you're using, could be environmental stress like EMF, could be dietary stress, eating things like seed oils, stress from toxins.
We expose some things that are actually happening in the real world that is the real reason that is keeping most people sick and dying that they don't want you to know about.
I don't think the medical system's trying to prevent us from dying.
The medical model is very based off preventing disease and preventing you from dying. They're not looking at optimizing your health.
And you're going to learn some secrets that you can biohack your health so you can not only have more energy, better high performance, but actually live longer and live a more functional, happy life.
Let's track how stressed I am. You tell me if we're on the right track or not. So my resting heart rate is in the red right now. It says 50 beats per minute.
50 beats per minute. So that's pretty good.
Why is it red?
If you're someone who values high performance, if you value having more energy, if you're a high performer that wants to get more done in your life, you are going to want to listen to this episode. If you're someone who struggles with energy, fatigue, or bloating, or anything wrong with your body, and you've had doctors in the past tell you that there's nothing wrong with you, then you're going to want to pay attention to this episode. You're going to love every single moment of it. And if you're brand new to this channel, then make sure you go and hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode, because we put out so much content to help you learn the skill set and the mindset to create your dream life. So without further ado, welcome to Dream Nation. Let's get into this episode and help me welcome the one and only Dr. Dan Kirkbride.
Dr. Dan, welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Dan, so before we dive into this episode, I really want to give the listeners a little bit of information about you. So you've been working with me and Simona and a lot of other high-performing entrepreneurs to help dial in their health effectively so we can become high performers. And just for the people that are watching this right now or listening to this, why should they stop whatever it is they're doing and really pay attention to the conversation we're about to have?
Yeah, we're going to dive into a lot of information that you're not going to find online, and I think there's a lot of conflicting information out there on social media that is confusing people. So the goal here today is to cut through a lot of the bullshit and give them some tangible takeaways they can start implementing in their life as of tomorrow to see an improvement in their health, energy, productivity.
I love it. So it is kind of like that. It's like every day you get on social media now, it's like there's new health gurus popping up left, right, and center. And there's a lot of information. Talk to us, I guess, how do we first navigate what is true, what is false? Like, how do we navigate what to actually listen to, what to pay attention to in this world of a lot of conflicting truths?
Yeah, it's a bit of a minefield out there. I think the first thing is you just have to be skeptical of everything you read and everything you see, especially what you're consuming. Like, your mind is your greatest asset, and whatever you're listening to, you're going to be consuming. So, looking at the credentials of people that you're actually paying attention to, number one, making sure they are someone that has a background in what they say they have a background in. They're not just some coach who's done a 2-day program in blood work and is now telling you they know everything about everything. I think number two is the biggest one is when anyone speaks in absolutes, that's a red flag. Whenever you or me have a conversation, much to your despise, I always say it depends a lot, because I think there's nuance in everything. It's never a one size fits all. So if you're ever following someone and they're black and white bastardizing something, or this is the best way to do something, I think that's also a red flag. So I think looking for people who understand the nuance, understand the 50 shades of grey when it comes to health, and can actually educate in a way that's not biased or, promoting products or promoting things that are linked to that where there might be a conflict of interest.
So when we first started working together, you were telling me, you're like, I can dial in your health. And I'm like, bro, I'm pretty dialed in. And then we did all my bloods and it came back where I'm like, got leaky gut and leaky brain. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about leaky gut, and now you've said to me that nearly every single person actually does have leaky gut. But before we get into your gut health stuff, what is leaky brain? What are some indicators to know that we've got something like this? What is it, and how do we actually know if we've got something like that?
Yeah, so what's to look out for? Some of the most common symptoms would be, poor memory, poor attention span, poor ability to focus, inability to stay focused on one task at a time. So a lot of people would be, the ADHD crowd, the people who are like, I've got ADHD, whether they've been diagnosed or not. There's a big link between the gut and the brain called the gut-brain axis. So a lot of these symptoms we just mentioned there, although they might be appearing in the brain and you have cognitive symptoms, would be, originating from the gut itself. So that's a big one. And then, a lot of neurodegenerative diseases or neurological symptoms and conditions such as like anxiety, depression, ADHD. And then, further down the track, if these things get unresolved for 20, 30 years, it could, become something more sinister like a Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, which, all this stuff here has been linked, and there's plenty of evidence and research behind this that people could look up as well.
So you're saying that, because it's almost like the growing percentage, what it feels like, of people who have ADHD is on the rise. And I could probably admit from like social media would probably be creating more of it. But do you think that, so what are you saying is there's actually a direct correlation? If people are like, oh, I can't focus as much, I'm forgetting things. Are you saying perhaps it might not be as much a labeled thing wrong with you, and it could be something as simple as, shit happening in your health?
Yeah, 100%. I think society loves, especially like the medical model, we love to label things and give it a diagnosis because it gives people meaning, gives people an explanation, and it doesn't take away from the fact that you might have said diagnosis. But with any chronic health condition or any, disease, like at the end of the day, there's a mechanism and there's a build up to that point there. So I think my view of looking at these things is like, how do we reverse engineer what were the actual, processes that happened earlier stages that have now led us to this scenario where you might have ADHD or depression or, Crohn's disease or something like this. So in the case of ADHD, over 50% of your dopamine is produced in your small intestine, and ADHD is a deficiency in dopamine in the brain. But if over 50% of your dopamine is produced in your small intestine and you had leaky gut, dysbiosis or damage to the intestine, that's going to influence your body's ability to generate dopamine. So to me, whether or not like you're looking at medication or supplements or whatever, it's like you should be looking at the root of that. Just taking a supplement or a medication to give you more dopamine, but not addressing the fact of, your production line is out of whack, is kind of missing the ball for me.
Is that what medicate, like, so if someone's got ADHD, because we're on this topic, they get medicated by a doctor, is that what these pills are doing, essentially just spiking dopamine?
Yeah, so they have different mechanisms depending on which one you look at, but like the most common ones would be things like, Ritalin or modafinil. These are the most commonly prescribed ones when it comes to ADHD. So they're going to spike those pathways in terms of trying to improve focus, and they do work, but, we're kind of missing the root. Like if you're just taking a medication for the rest of your life, like sure, it'll help you with the symptoms, but in the process, we're kind of ignoring the reason why it happened in the first place. So I think it's always important to look at, what's the actual root of this symptom or condition you're experiencing, then work backwards and look to achieve the same result in a more natural way that doesn't involve having to take a medication or a pill the rest of your life.
Cool. So I want to dive into, because a lot of people listen to this, they're entrepreneurs, they're high performers, they want to get more done. We always want to not just biohack our health, but hack our performance. We want to get more out of each rep type thing. Yeah. So what are some things that are actually damaging us, that are causing more fatigue? What are the things that you've seen across your clients that actually cause more people to not be at their optimal? So higher, so not focusing as much, more fatigue, low energy, not thinking clearly. What are the things that actually, what are the root causes mainly you see?
Yeah, so I think if we work backwards, we go, all right, well, leaky brain, let's call it, which is derived from leaky gut, which is derived from damage to the intestine. And then when it comes to damage to the intestine is really just comes down to stress. So an increase in cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And when it comes to stress, there's a multitude of things that can cause stress. And the main one people think of is obviously like psychological stress, emotional stress, but there's a lot of hidden stresses that people don't generally consider in their lifestyle. And these can be things like chemical stress. So, it could be from products you're using, could be environmental stress like EMF, could be dietary stress, eating things like seed oils, stress from toxins. So non-stick cookware, things that have these toxic chemicals in it. These are just some things that, off the top of my head, are things that people aren't aware of, where we could dive a lot deeper into it.
Yeah, I actually want to. Have you seen that movie? I think it's called Deep Water.
I've not, but I've heard of it from Simona.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's called Deep Water. And what they found was the chemicals that there's mixed in to create Teflon. They created back in the military to put Teflon around the tires on like an army tank to make things not stick to it. Yeah. It's got poisonous, cancer-causing chemicals. Yeah. And everyone's cooking with Teflon frying pans and shit. And you can still buy Teflon frying pans. And it's been proven to actually cause insane, like cancer, degenerative diseases, all these types of things. You can watch the movie called Deep Water, and it's most gnarly shit ever. Yeah,
I literally did a video on this week, and it's PFAs and PFOAs are the two toxic components in non-stick cookware, and they've been shown to be carcinogenic, so cause cancer, disrupt thyroid function, increase cholesterol, increase inflammation in the body, increase free radicals, which can damage DNA. So pretty crazy stuff, and it can take your body a long time to remove these chemicals. So they're called forever chemicals, and the reason they're called forever chemicals is they have a half-life of 7 years, which in English, people listening, means in 7 years' time, half of that chemical will be removed from your body. In another 7 years, another half, so 50%, then 25%, then 12.5%. So for you to get down to less than 2% in the body, it's going to take you almost 49 to 56 years. So it's a long time to get these chemicals out of your body, which is why they call it forever chemicals. And they're in things like non-stick cookware. We can also find them in a lot of household products, and also cleaning products and things like that. So I think that's probably the biggest area that...
and these are causing stress to the body.
Yeah, so stress is just a term for anything that is going to disrupt homeostasis or balance to the body. So it can be, like I said before, it can be chemicals from these things we're talking about. It can be from toxins in our food. It can be from products in our household. It can be from thermal stress, from hot and cold therapy like we talked about yesterday. So there's a lot of different stresses that can cause the same physiological response. And then at the end of the day, it's like we kind of have stress, increase in cortisol. Cortisol is a catabolic hormone, can then break down the gut wall, damage the gut. And then when we start to have this damage to the gut, this can then increase inflammation, decrease our production of neurotransmitters, so dopamine, serotonin, and this increase in inflammation in our gut can then cause inflammation in the brain. And then we can start to have leaky brain, essentially.
Okay, so essentially all the results we're getting in life that we don't want. Poor memory, not focusing, fatigued, no energy, all these sorts of things, bloating. These are all caused fundamentally by stress.
Yes.
So walk us through then, what are some weird indicators you've come across for us to become aware that we're actually more stressed than what we should be?
The best one, and this is where I always say tracking data is the best way to get information on this. And I say that, business owners, like, you track your metrics, you track your finances, you track your revenue, you track your KPIs, but most business owners don't track anything to do with their health. And there's 4 main markers that we can use to track stress in our body. It's heart rate variability, body temperature, and respiratory rate. If we can see those 4 markers with something like an Oura ring, which is what I got you to get, we can start to see how your body's responding to certain interventions, to certain foods, to certain supplements, and start to see, is your body in a more stressed state, sympathetic, or is it in more of a parasympathetic, calm state? So that'd be my recommendation to everyone listening, is get some sort of data so you're not just guessing, you have something objective. But signs and symptoms are pretty much everything you said before. Like, it could be, low in energy despite no matter how much sleep you get. You're always waking up lethargic, you're always feeling tired, you need that afternoon nap, you're relying on stimulants, you're relying on caffeine, you got poor cognitive function, so you're not able to pay attention, poor memory. It can also be physical, you're always sore, your recovery is quite poor, you're getting recurrent injuries, skin issues, food sensitivities are another big one. So there's a whole list of what can happen. It's just depending on the person and what they're exposed to will depend on what the symptoms that they're presenting with are. And it might seem like they're unrelated in a lot of cases, where people come in, they've got a problem with their skin or a problem with their thyroid, and they don't really associate it with stress. They kind of think of it as a thyroid problem or a skin problem. But if we unravel the layers, you start to see it all comes from the same place, and it's like stress is the top of the pyramid.
So how do we actually track it then, right? So for the people that wear like a Whoop or an Oura or even an Apple Watch, or they can start to track these things, what do we need to look for? Like, what are we actually looking for to know that we're in the safe zone or we're overstressed? Or
Yeah, so it's quite individual for everyone, but there is some general guidelines. So let's go heart rate first. If you're tracking your resting heart rate, you want to see that ideally below 60 beats per minute first thing in the morning as your like waking heart rate. Ideally, we want to see it closer to 50, but below 60 would be sort of like my baseline. If I saw it was higher than 60, that would be indicating to me that that person has, a fair amount of stress in their life at that point in time, or potentially over that period of time that we've been tracking it.
Let's track how stressed I am. Can you throw me my phone? So I'm going to go through my aura right now with you. I haven't actually done this yet. So I'm going to go through and let's see how stressed out I am. You tell me if we're on the right track or not.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at this. So I'm going to look for what activity?
You're going to go to readiness.
Readiness.
Should be the second one from the right.
Okay. So my resting heart rate is in the red right now.
What's it at?
It says 50 beats per minute.
50 beats per minute. So that's pretty good.
Why is it red?
Red. Ignore that.
Ignore it. All right.
Yeah.
Ignore the technology. But so I'm looking for, is that what it is every day when I wake up?
That's what it was today. So you have a
okay.
resting heart rate every
So
single day.
yesterday was 48.
Mm-hmm.
The day before was 45.
Yeah.
44, 48.
So see how there was a trend there. There was 44, 45, 48, 51. You can see the heart rate's trending up, which would indicate the last few days you've had an increased amount of stress and your body's ability to handle that stress has not been sufficient.
Oh, it's definitely had an increase last few days.
Yeah.
But so you're telling me that I'm cool like a cucumber?
Well, that's where individualization comes in. So, generically speaking, you want to see people below 60, but what I would see when I work with people is I'm looking for trends rather than absolutes. So if I saw that for you, if you look at your aura ring again and look at HRV, over the last 4 days and tell me
71.
if that was going up or down.
71 today, 68, 67, 73, 67. So an average of 70-ish.
Yeah, so not too bad.
So
usually what you'll see is there'll be an inverse relationship between heart rate and heart rate variability. So heart rate will come up, HRV will come down, and that's more of an indicator that your nervous system is in more of a sympathetic or like fight and flight mode, versus the inverse. If you have a lower resting heart rate and a higher HRV, that's more indicating that your nervous system is well rested, you're handling stress well, you're quite adaptable, and your nervous system is more biased towards parasympathetic rest and digest. So looking at those metrics there, you can start to get an idea of where people are at. And let's say we check that over a week or a month, it's like we can start to see, well, when we do this supplementation protocol, or when I train your training program, or I change your diet, like how is your body actually actually responding? Like, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? I think that's the biggest thing, because otherwise there's a million supplements out there and a million different nutrition plans you can follow. And like you said, there's so many gurus out there who have different ideas. It's like, well, there's not a one size fits all at the end of the day. It needs to be what fits you. So working with someone who can look at these stats and metrics, do an intervention, assess how you're actually responding to it, and then figure out if we're heading in the right direction or not.
Talk to me about bloating. Is bloating normal?
No, it is common, but not normal.
Explain this.
So everyone listening to this podcast, if you think about the 10 people you spend the most amount of time with, I guarantee at least 6 or 7 of those people experiences bloating on a daily, if not multiple times a week basis. So it might seem common because you're surrounded by people who are experiencing bloating, and naturally, if you're surrounded by 10 people who have the same symptom, you're going to start to think, well, hey, this must be normal because everyone around me has it. It's like anything. But just because a lot of people have it doesn't necessarily mean it's normal. But because it's become so common in society, we've kind of shifted towards thinking it's normal. But bloating, at the end of the day, is one of the first and one of the earliest symptoms of poor gut health. So I kind of think of it as, imagine you're driving your car on the freeway, and you're driving, you're cruising along, and the red light starts flashing saying check engine light. That's like bloating. It's a signal from your body saying, hey, something's not right. I need you to pop the hood, pull over, and see what's going on. If you just ignore that bloating, which is what most people do, they say, oh, it's normal. There's nothing really wrong here. I'm just going to keep going about my day. Yeah, the bloating then becomes worse down the track, and the bloating might then become a food sensitivity, and then it might start to become damage to the gut, and then it might become leaky gut, and then leaky gut becomes dysbiosis, and then dysbiosis becomes an infection, and then that becomes Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, bowel cancer. So it's like there's a progression, and obviously that's me being quite extreme. This happens over a 10-20 year period, but bloating is the first sort of cardinal sign of IBS symptoms, which is never a normal scenario. Like there's always a reason if we pop the hood of what's driving bloating and IBS. Could be an infection, could be stress, could be poor diet. So what that's telling us is really we have to stop, pay attention to the the warning signs our body is telling us. I refer to these as like the body's whispers. The body will always whisper to you first, or sometimes you talk about the feather, the brick in the bus. Bloating's like the feather. It's the first warning sign, and you can ignore it and get the brick later, and then the bus, or you can stop and actually investigate, get your bloods done, do a bit of a life audit, work with a coach and figure out what's driving that bloating before it becomes more of a sinister problem.
Have we actually been lied to? Like when it comes to modern medicine, when it comes to, because you said go get your bloods done. Because I've gone to normal GPs, I've gone to normal doctors in the past because I've been like, hey, I think there's something's wrong with me. They do the bloods and it comes back, no, you're perfectly normal. But then we do it and you're like, no, you're completely fucked up. What's actually happening? Have we been lied to, or what's happening here?
I don't think I was that mean. But yeah, so it just comes down to the assessment tool. Like, the old school analogy of if you assessed a fish and an elephant's ability to climb a tree, it's not really a good assessment criteria, right? It's the same as with a lot of blood tests. So when you look at blood tests, the way they have to generate the averages is if we got 100 people in our local vicinity, we got everyone to get a blood test, and we wanted to create a reference range of what is considered normal, you would take those 100 people, get the averages, and then decide a high range and a low range and a middle range, yeah? But let's say now those 100 people that got their blood tests were 80% of them were sick and had a chronic disease or weren't the best level of health. Would you, Morgan T. Nelson, who has world-class standards in every area of his life, want to be compared to a sick person? No. So now you think of it, well, 80 to 90% of people who get their blood test taken are usually people who already have a medical complaint. They're seeing a doctor for something they're concerned about. They're in the hospital and they've already got a disease or some sort of problem. Or they're post-surgery, they're pre-surgery, something like that. We're now taking those ranges and we're now using that to create and generate the normal reference range, or the bell curve distribution, which is anyone in that middle section is normal. Anyone outside of that bell curve is now considered abnormal. But to get to the end of that bell curve, the ranges are so big that that's why when people like you or me get our blood test done, we're told that we're normal. But it's not really assessing against a quality, litmus test. So that's generally why I'd say 9 times out of 10 people like you who come see me like, hey man, I got my bloods done. I don't feel very good. Like I saw the GP, but he says everything's normal, but I definitely don't feel normal. Like what's up? What's like, you're comparing yourself against a sick person. Yeah. And until you...
So I'm good compared to someone who's far from good.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not trying to get you, the medical model is very based off preventing disease, from preventing you from dying. They're not looking at optimizing your health. So if you're a 28-year-old or 30-year-old male who's looking to dial in their health, you don't have any health concerns. You're just like, I want to be the best I can be. Would you not want to compare your bloods against that population? So it's a standard comparing apples and apples versus right now it's like you're comparing apples and bananas. Yeah, you're a healthy, young, fit man comparing your blood test against, a diseased population.
You said they're interested in helping you prevent from dying. I disagree. I don't think the medical system's trying to prevent us from dying. I think they have things in place to ease dying if you are dying, because perfect example, there's strains of peptides that we've talked about that has been proven to be some of the most healing miracle drugs on the planet that are becoming more and more illegal. Explain that. What's your thoughts around that? Why would something that we could get our hands on that's so good for us be so hard to actually get?
What's up, Dream Nation? Have you ever wondered how far ahead your life would have already been if you had got access to this type of content at a younger age? Look, this is why I need your help. I'm trying to build the #1 personal development platform out there to teach you guys the tips, tricks, and attitude of what it takes to live your dream life, and to bring the type of education that we all wish we had in school. This show only grows by word of mouth and new subscribers, so it would mean the world to me if you could smash that subscribe button right now, leave us a 5-star written review, or drop a comment below and share this episode with a friend. I would be forever grateful. All right, now let's get back into this episode.
Look, I think the answer's in clear sight if you read between the lines and you follow the money.
Everything's business, eh?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's not much money in prevention. There's a lot of money in cure. So, create a problem, sell a solution would be what I look at it as. when I say they're good at keeping you alive, like, yes, if we get back to the blood test, let's say you are someone that has bloating, you have poor energy. This is most of my people that come to see me, most of my clients. They're business owners, poor energy, I can't pay attention. I'm struggling to get out of bed in the morning. I don't feel right. I've got bloating, my skin's flaring up. I can't eat these foods. It's like, I feel absolutely trash, but go see the doctor. My blood tests are normal. It's like, what the fuck's going on? Yeah. Well, the reality is until that IBS or that leaky gut sticks around for the next 5-10 years and develops into something like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, you're not going to pick that up. You're not going to be outside the reference ranges on a blood test. And I guarantee if you go get a colonoscopy, a gastroscopy, something like that, where they stick a tube up your ass or down your throat, you're going to look at the intestine, and at that stage, it's not going to have ulcers. It's not going to have polyps. It's not going to have enough damage at that point for them to actually diagnose you with a problem. So then you're going to spend $1,000 on this colonoscopy and a blood test, get told they're both negative, they're both normal, but you still feel like trash. And it's not until 5-10 years later that eventually you get outside those reference ranges, which is a slow process. Yeah, it's not happening over a week, it's happening over 5-10 years. And then one day you're in the doctor's office and it's like, hey, you've got bowel cancer. Hey, you've got Crohn's disease. You've got autoimmune disease. And people are like, what the fuck? My blood test was normal 6 months ago. How has this happened? Yeah, because in the background, this has been happening slowly, but the reference ranges are so damn big for normal, even though the optimal ranges are here. So if I looked at that blood test, I go, hey, we're sort of outside of optimal right now. We're not at the point where things are fucked, but we should do something now and spend the next 3 to 6 months healing to prevent this happening. So yeah, the problem there is just the litmus test is not correct. We're comparing apples and bananas, and people are waiting until there's a problem to then get medicated. And then, I guess that leads into your question before of like, well, it's a lot easier for that process to happen. And then someone needs a medication or a prescription for the next 30 years to stay alive, rather than to have spent 6 months, educating them, changing their diet, giving them something like the peptides, which have been shown to help with healing damage to the gut, reducing inflammation, calming down the immune system. But yeah, I think we both know if that was the situation, that would be billions of dollars lost. I did a post the other day. Guess how many colonoscopies on average happen a year in Australia?
How many?
700,000. And guess how much they cost?
How much?
$2,500 to $3,000. So I did the math. Off the top of my head, can't remember. I think it was like $1.7 billion a year in colonoscopies.
Yeah. Let me have a look.
Yeah.
2,500.
It was too big on my calculator.
2,500 times how many? 700,000?
It'll come up at like 1.
Yeah, it doesn't even say it says E, it says error. So it'd probably 1.75 billion.
I think it was 1.75 billion. And I was like, imagine if you put 10% of that money towards educating people properly on like what they should be eating, the different types of stress, what type of cookware to use, what type of foods to avoid, what type of foods to consume, how to reduce chemicals and toxins in your life. Like if we put 10% of that money towards educating people on that, like fuck, 80% of those people wouldn't get to the stage where they've got bowel cancer and ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. But then at the same time, that's 80% of those people that aren't now a subscription model for 20, 30 years.
Yeah. But that's like you said, like that's the perfect thing. Like how, like this, I don't think it's not out of awareness for people to know that the pharmaceutical industry is one of the biggest companies in the entire world and they make money on selling the solution to people's problems. So if you could sell the solution to people's problems, wouldn't you, if you could also help create it, wouldn't you create it? And you'd probably want to do everything in your power to stop, I guess, people like you sharing information on.
Yeah, probably get cancelled after this. Well,
yeah.
The peptide scenario with BPC 157, it's becoming in a Schedule 4 prescription only as of June 1st this year. And, if you do the research there and follow the money again, it's like 95% of the FDA, is from the pharmaceutical scheme. So it's like if you have people who were, progressing from leaky gut to, these more, autoimmune / chronic diseases of the bowel are now going to buy 3 bottles of Ultimate GI Repair, $900, do a 3-month course, 90-day course of that, and you're doing some serious healing of colitis. That person doesn't need to spend 10, 20 years. They're never going to get to that point. So you can see how having that solution there is going to create a big problem down the track for the medical system.
Yeah. So step 1, it's really about actually getting their bloods done properly and getting them looked at compared to where they want to be, not versus compared to someone who's sick.
So there's normal ranges, which is a big variance. And if I just give you an example, neutrophils, which are a type of white blood cell, the reference range is 2 to 9. That's massive. What it should be, optimal ranges, is 5.5 to 7.5. So yeah, it's a huge difference there. So you want to get your bloods tested. You want to have a comprehensive blood test done that covers all bases, number one, which can be quite challenging sometimes through the medical system because you don't get everything you ask for. Step number 2 is then to get those bloods compared against an optimal litmus test using optimal ranges, so you can actually understand where you're at right now in terms of peak performance, not just are you still alive and free of disease. I think the definition of health is not just the absence of disease. It's literally the World Health Organization, which is corrupt as fuck. But ironically, their definition of health is, not just the absence of disease. Yeah. But like, ironically, when we talk about health, like most people I talk to as well, I tell them these things, they're like, oh, but I'm pretty healthy. I'm like, what makes you say you're healthy? They're like, oh, I don't have anything wrong with me.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, is that like if we set the bar so low that because you don't have anything wrong with you, you're peak health? Like, do you jump out of bed in the morning? Do you have endless amounts of energy? Do you look healthy? Do you have a nice physique? Do you have good muscle mass? Do you have good metabolic function, cardiovascular function? If you don't have those things, you're not healthy. Yeah, it's going to butt hurt some people, but optimal health and being disease-free are two different ends of the spectrum. Like, disease-free is the bare minimum. So, yeah, getting your bloods tested against optimal ranges to figure out where you're at and what improvements you can be making to your life. And the third one would be doing a good lifestyle audit, which is what I do with every new client. And that's where we go through the different areas of stress and what areas could be, what areas you don't know of, which could be contributing to stress. So, for example, the non-stick cookware. Are you using non-stick cookware? Are you still drinking out of plastic water bottles? Are you still drinking unfiltered water? Are you still cooking with seed oils? Are you still scared of the sun and not getting enough sun? Are you still scared of an animal-based diet and think meat's going to kill you? All these things that could be contributing to stress and malnourishment, essentially.
We joked the other day, I said about a certain peptide, and you're like, well, you could just go live in Puerto Rico and eat raw animals. Tell me about that. Like, is there something, because you said about the raw, the food diets and stuff, like, what is it, because it feels like there's also a big agenda being pushed to become vegan as well.
I think this is, someone who's really good on this is BioLane on social media. He's probably one of the only guys I would follow who actually, is not full of shit and is evidence-based. And he always has a funny quote I like, which is, he printed it on a t-shirt and it says data over feelings.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that because I think a lot of people get emotionally connected to this certain type of diet as a part of their personality. But when you look at the, clinical research and the data, everything points towards that, an omnivorous diet is the best diet possible for a human being. And then there's people that go to the extreme. There's the carnivores who are like, vegetables are toxic, they're going to kill you. And then there's, the vegans who, meat's going to kill you, meat's toxic. A whole nother conversation, unless we've got time. But, there's truth to both of those. But somewhere in the middle, like anything, it's not the sexy answer. But the true answer is, well, the best people, like the people that have the best health outcomes and health results in terms of longevity, eat an animal-based diet with fruit and vegetables. So we're having animal-based diets. So this is going to be things like red meat, eggs, dairy, and then we're including fruits, berries, polyphenols, things that are high in antioxidants, and then also including, fiber in our diet with vegetables. So it's not rocket science. It's as simple as that. But like anything, it's probably simple building a business, yeah? But if you tell people the simple answers, they're like, it can't be that simple, Morgan. I need this like complex business plan. No, you just need to fucking do the right thing and do it consistently for 12 months. So people chop and change to all these different types of diets, hoping it's going to be the next thing, when the reality is it's usually about what you take out, not what you put in, removing a lot of the toxic things you're currently doing in your lifestyle on that list I talked about, and then consuming a whole food-based diet, which is omnivorous.
What can our digestion tell us about where our health's at the moment?
A lot. Your digestion is going to be, like, you've got this thing called your gut-brain axis, and people always say your gut is your second brain. And the reason they say that essentially is we have this thing called our vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve, comes from the back of our brain, comes down through the neck, goes under our clavicle, and then bifurcates and then supports all of our visceral organs. And there's a two-way relationship or a two-way direction between the brain and the gut via the vagus nerve. 80% of the information is going from the gut to the brain, only 20% from the brain to the gut. So you have 4 times more information coming from your gut to your brain rather than the other way around, which really starts you to think makes you think about it in terms of, well, people always talk about, brain health being the most important in your brain, but at the end of the day, if your gut is in complete disarray, if you have dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of good and bad bacteria, if you have damage to the intestine, leaky gut, there's literally absolute chaos going on down here. How well do you think your brain is going to function? How well do you think any other system in your body is going to function? So your gut health and listening to things like I was saying before, bloating, like listening to things like bloating, diarrhea, constipation, food sensitivities, eating a certain food and having a reaction or feeling, not great. These are all the early whispers or the feather that you need to be paying attention to. And if you're ignoring them, it's going to become a brick.
Isn't there I know there's different stages of poo
Yes.
that you can learn from.
What a conversation. My favorite thing on a Monday morning is waking up to photos of people's poo in my Slack messages.
They do this?
Yeah, bro. I ask him to. I have
You're a sicko, eh?
I'm a sick fuck. Yeah, so I ask him to do a symptom tracker, and part of the symptom tracker is we use the Bristol stool chart. So I ask him, how many times do you poo a day? And then on a scale of 1 to 7, what does your poo look like? And there's if anyone is listening to this, you can Google the Bristol stool chart and you'll see an image, and it has 6 different categories 1 through to 6, and we ideally want to see your poo at a number 3 or a number 4. Number 1 and number 2 is diarrhea. It's not very constipation. It's not very well formed, so it might be pebbly and rocky. These are usually people that don't have good digestion, good lymphatic function. They're not actually able to detoxify and clear toxins from the body effectively. Can be low serotonin, which ironically we talked about earlier. 95% of serotonin is produced in your small intestine, so low serotonin decreases bowel motility. Usually you start to see constipation as a result of that, and these are the people that don't go to the toilet every day. They might go to the toilet 3 times a week, and when they do, it's really hard to pass. It's pebbly, and it's not very pleasant. Flip side of that chart, you got 5 and 6. These are the the other extreme. These are the people that leave skid marks. It smells pretty foul. They're really sludgy, really grimy shit. You got to get the scrubber out after every shit. You clear out a room. You got to go hard in the air freshener. And this is and this can be a few things, but again, that's not normal. So I think all the signs are there, and I think as a medical practitioner these days, there's so many tests available. You got stool tests, you got DNA tests, you got blood tests, you got organic acid tests. There's so many tests you can use with people, but everything is in plain sight. If you ask the right questions and you know what you're looking for, back in 1900s, doctors didn't have any of this stuff. They just used to look at you, ask you the right questions, ask you about your poo, ask you about your pee, and they'd be able to diagnose you what the problem was. So I think as much as the tests are useful these days, getting back to our roots and being able to ask the right questions and also self-assess what's happening. If you're getting bloated all the time, your energy's terrible, your shits are sludgy or they're hard to pass, that's sign number 1. That's a feather. Go get that shit sorted, literally. Yeah. So, yeah, all the signs are in plain sight. Usually there's a massive level of cognitive dissonance because people are so busy in their day-to-day life that they're not paying attention to the signs their body's telling them.
Yes, and we've been trained to, a problem is when we're dying. Then you go to the doctor. So you're really talking about how to actually get health, how to really live from a place of prevention.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Prevention rather than cure.
So if most of our serotonin is made in our gut, most of our dopamine is made in our gut, which is the happy chemicals, what do you think about depression? Is depression actually a thing, or is it actually a case of really having bad gut health?
Yeah, so look, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, so I can't clinically diagnose it, but what I can say is there's definitely a correlation between the two, and that's not my opinion. That's biology and physiology. We know from the research that 95% of your serotonin is produced in your small intestine, in these things called your enterochromaffin cells, and 50% of your dopamine in those same cells. So if we think about it logically, if there is a high level of stress, which increases cortisol is very catabolic. It loves protein. Collagen is a type of protein. Collagen wraps around the entirety of our small intestine. So if you're stressed, you increase cortisol. Cortisol goes, hey, I want some protein. I'm hungry. Where can I find it? The intestine's wrapped in it. Let's go start to catabolize the intestine, break down the collagen. You now have damage, inflammation in the gut. Imagine those cells that I mentioned are like a factory, and each of those factories producing serotonin. If we've just destroyed 50% of your factories, your production of serotonin is going to be severely depleted, same as dopamine. So would it be a surprise that now you're having depressive symptoms or maybe anxiety-based symptoms or ADHD symptoms? Because low dopamine is going to mean low drive, low mood, inability to pay attention, poor memory. Low dopamine is also associated with, Parkinson's disease, dementia, Alzheimer's. So again, it's like natural progression over a 10, 20, 30-year period. In terms of serotonin does a few main things. Number one, it improves bowel motility. We talked about that before. So, constipation, diarrhea. Number two is emotional regulation. So if you have low serotonin, it's going to be associated with people who are quite unable to regulate. So you can do all the breath work in the world and do all the healing in the world, but if you haven't addressed the physiology, you're really going to be missing a big part of the puzzle. And then, alongside that as well, having low serotonin can be implicated in diseases like depression, where, they'll be prescribed SSRIs, which are a type of drug which basically helps your body produce more serotonin. So, yeah, I think there's definitely a correlation that can't be ignored. And if you were someone that was dealing with those symptoms, I would definitely look at exhausting that pathway, like making sure we're really dialed in with our health and our gut health before we reach for a pill that's going to be a lifetime subscription. Yeah,
for sure. So what can we do to actually start repairing these pieces of our gut so it's not being attacked all the time?
Yeah, so it's like there's always the equation I look at is you've got tissue restoration, which is like build in and repair, and this is driven by our parasympathetic nervous system. And then you've got tissue degradation or breakdown, and this is driven by your sympathetic nervous system, which are both part of your autonomic nervous system, which is a branch of our nervous system. Yeah. So straight up by me saying that, it's like, well, we need to push the balance in favor of our parasympathetic nervous system, because no matter how good your diet is or how good your, how many supplements you take or anything like that, if that balance is in favor of degradation, if you're breaking down the cells faster than you can repair them, you're never going to win. So the first thing you need to do is you need to identify what are the stresses in your life currently. Is it chemical stress, metabolic stress, dietary stress, thermal stress, emotional stress, environmental stress? Identify which stresses are the biggest needles at this point in time and look at how we can mitigate those stresses. Because by doing that, it's going to decrease the sympathetic drive, which is going to stop what I just explained with the cortisol breaking down the gut. Once we've done that and we have less interference or less stress in the system, then we can look at healing. And then when it comes to healing, there are some things we can do. Collagen is great for repairing our gut. Vitamin C paired with collagen is a very powerful combination. So collagen could be in the form of collagen protein, could be in the form of bone broth, which I got you to drink every morning. And you're like, well, you're meant to be drinking it every morning.
I do take collagen every day, actually.
Yeah. So collagen protein powder.
That's why I look so good.
That's why you look so young. Collagen in the form of bone broth is another good one. Obviously the peptides we talked about. Peptides, lots, GHK, copper peptide, larazotide, BPC 157. These are all good peptides which have been shown to help to heal the integrity of those cells of the gut that have been damaged. So it's not a simple answer, unfortunately, but to summarize, it's really identifying and reducing stresses that are causing the breakdown, at the same time looking at things that we can do to repair the gut through supplementation and dietary changes.
But it's just like building a successful business though, right? If it was easy, everybody wants to have a lot of money, a lot of freedom, successful business, all these things. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And it's the same with having optimal health. It's definitely not easy. Like the amount of things we've been doing, supplements I'm taking, some days are good, some days are weird, and like learning and growing and like healing my gut and detoxing things. And it's a quite intense process we've been doing. But that's because I want the things that most people don't have. And that's what I love about what you sort of do. Like you really work with people who go, okay, if you're healthy, cool, but let's get you absolute like elite, athletic, optimal. And that's what I'm wanting. Like I'm only 30 years old. I know starting to dial this shit in now, like as long as I don't die in like some hectic skydiving accident, I'll hit 130, 140 years old. Yeah. They say the person who will live to 150 is already alive. You got people like Brian Johnson doing insane shit, literally reversing aging. Yeah. And until someone kills him because he figured it out and he shares the process. So it's really about actually going through the process, investing yourself and doing all that, which is why we're partnering up to run a retreat. So tell these guys a little bit about it. So obviously, we're going to run an entrepreneur's high performance retreat at the end of this year in Bali together. So we're teaming up the Life Immersion Retreat You're going to do lots of things in your domain. I'm doing lots of things in my domain. How do we sort of psychologically dial in our own life? But tell these guys a little bit about what can they kind of expect at this retreat. Like, why would they want to come spend 5 days on an island with us?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, the main thing is going to be just cutting through all the bullshit and being able to take away some tangible and practical skills that they can then apply into their life outside of the retreat. So the overview, the game plan is really going to be looking at the 8 key areas of health, and the 8 key things that are currently preventing you from achieving that health, and going through each of those areas one by one, giving you the understanding and the knowledge of what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, and then some practical skills to take away so you can implement that into your life and really just fast track your progress. I think a lot of the stuff you're going to learn, it will take people 5-10 years to mess around going through program after program, plan after plan with coach after coach. The idea is like we're taking everything I've learned in the last 10 years, consolidate it into that 5 days to really give you the biggest bang for buck, the 80-20 of the 80-20, so you can get the most amount of return on investment. Love it.
So, yes, this is the first time we've done it, because once we've came into each other's worlds, we're like, you're dialed in with the health stuff. All the stuff I do is like psychology, neuroscience, behavior, success. So we're going to blend this together and create a super sick high-performance entrepreneurs retreat. What I'm going to do, I'm going to drop, there's going to be like an application. So I'm going to put an application in the episode below. If you guys actually want to come to Bali at the end of this year, 2024, at the end of this year, and spend a week with us in Bali, fill out the application and we can be in touch with you guys. Because how many are we going to take? 20 or 25 people?
I think 20.
Something like this. Yeah, like nice and intimate. So this will absolutely just sell out super fast. So if you guys want to get access to it, fill out the application below and one of us can jump on a call with you and tell you what it's all about. So obviously it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can fly to Bali. Why not come to Bali? Use the excuse.
Business expense.
Come on a holiday. Yeah, business expense. Beautiful dude, mate. This has been fun. Where can everybody find you on social media?
Yeah, just Instagram. So it's at dr.daniel.kirkbride.
Love it. And final question. If you were to go back to your 18-year-old self and give him 30 seconds of advice, what would it be?
First thing that came to my mind would be slow down. Slow down and don't put so much pressure on yourself to get to where you want to get to. Do things once and do it properly.